four players that the Indiana Fever should core to make sure that no team can touch them heading into the expansion draft. Remember, you just lose these players straight up. You don't get anything back for the players. They're gone. We didn't get anything for Temi, did we? No.
The Indiana Fever are the buzz of the town because they have dominated headlines and social media feeds. Everywhere you look, people are discussing them. There is a lot of debate about the future of sports bars. Every action is examined by podcasts. Twitter goes crazy after every game. But what if the real story isn't happening on the court? What if all of the incredible performances, wins, and losses we've been witnessing have only been a distraction from the real drama occurring behind closed doors? Behind the highlight clips, post-game interviews, and painstakingly organized press briefings, whispers of a broken dressing room have grown into a roar that cannot be disregarded or dismissed as untrue rumors. With the sudden music and intentional dismissal of four players in fast succession, it appears that head coach Stephanie White has finally acted, implementing a plan that may have taken months to design. But was this about team building and deliberate roster formation? The kind of tough decisions championship organizations must make? Or was it a desperate attempt to regain control of a squad that was about to collapse? A last-ditch effort to salvage a failing season. The basketball community has been watching with a mix of intrigue, music concern, and morbid curiosity as the Fever's internal issues have begun to surface. What began as hazy murmurs whispered in arena hallways and unverified reports from unidentified sources has developed into a full-fledged organizational crisis that might ruin what many thought would be the franchise's pivotal season. Everybody has a straightforward but important question. What actually happened in Indianapolis? To understand the current issue, we need to look back in time. Music with the Indiana Fever, this wasn't always the case. A few years ago, they were among the league's best clubs and a model of dependability and professionalism. Championship banners were on show in their arena. Despite having a loyal and passionate fan base, professional sports are brutal, and the Fever ultimately had to confront the reality that all organizations must confront. Rebuild or become outdated. Stephanie White was not hired in a rush. The front office conducted in-depth interviews, met with league sources, and examined hours of video from her previous coaching jobs. White had a tremendous background, having played basketball at several different levels. She had played and coached in Indiana before, so she knew the market there. It was believed that she could restore the discipline and defensive identity that had once defined Fever basketball. The team also made the crucial decision to draft generational talent at the same time. When Caitlin Clark's name was revealed on draft night, the crowd erupted. Supporters felt hopeful. The media published headlines. Dollar signs, ticket sales, jersey sales, revenue, and appearances on national television were also observed by the front office. Clark was the epitome of what modern basketball had become. Vibrant, creative, unique, and incredibly captivating to see. However, nobody gave this any attention during those joyous moments. What happens if a coach who values structure is partnered with a player who likes chaos? What would happen if you put together a team centered around a superstar and hired a coach who doesn't believe that superstar treatment is appropriate? These particular decisions planted the seeds of the current catastrophe. Actions that initially appeared prudent but ultimately proved to be inherently contradictory. You might be able to spot the warning signs of impending tragedy if you knew where to look. Subtle at first, but every week it becomes more apparent. Seasoned reporters and league insiders who had covered the WNBA for years and had a sense of when something wasn't right had been spotting small clues for weeks before the scandal became widely public. On the surface, it appeared to the untrained viewer watching games on TV that the team was just going through the normal growing pains that accompany adding new players and adjusting to a new system. Every team goes through this, isn't that right? New players need some time to become acquainted with the playbook. The development of chemistry takes time. It takes time for coaches to learn their staff and work out rotations. These are the platitudes that dominate post-game press conferences following crushing losses, the assurances that front offices give anxious fans. But others who went to practices, spoke with teammates, and had access to the organization's internal operations uncovered something much more alarming. The team's cohesiveness was being destroyed by a fundamental disagreement between ideals and styles. Coach Stephanie White, who is renowned in the basketball world for her plain demeanor and tough defensive approach, was suddenly leading a team that featured some of the most potent offensive players in the game. Her CV emphasizes discipline, organization, and a rigorous possession-by-possession mentality that has helped her throughout her coaching career. She places a high priority on defense since she thinks the opposition should earn every point. She is in favor of offensive strategies where every player knows their position and executes it perfectly. She believes in hierarchy and respects authority. But this went beyond disagreements about tactics or methods, the kind of disagreement, music, that can be resolved by compromise or adaptation. This was a struggle for the Korea values of the team. The movie theaters and practice sessions in Indianapolis are fighting a philosophical war. It was old school versus new school, organization versus independence, and innovation versus experience. Like every conflict, this one would also be fatal. A close observer may sense the tension. Body language told a disconnect story during timeouts that words could never. Music. Players would appear to listen while nodding during defensive instructions, but during attacking setups, they would exchange quiet glances. Some players would moan when a play was music called, and others would quietly shake their heads when a teammate tried a shot that wasn't in the system. The mood on the bench fluctuated a lot during games, suggesting that the team was anything from unified following an outstanding defensive stop. Everyone would be standing and cheering. Music. Then, half of the bench would remain sitting and passively clap during an attacking highlight. Veterans of the league could see what was happening. Because they had previously been on dysfunctional teams, they were aware of the symptoms. Music. Sources close to the organization claimed angry exchanges behind closed doors, players creating separate camps, and a coaching staff that fought to hold onto authority. One version claims that during a practice session, White frequently stopped play to rectify offensive placement, but a player soon discovered that the improper positioning had created an open shot. Another described a movie session where the room was physically and figuratively divided, with some participants sitting in the front rows nodding in agreement with White's arguments while others sat in the back, clearly disinterested and crossing their arms. The front office recruited sports psychologists to manage team chemistry, held secret meetings with key players, and even asked other coaches in the league for guidance on how to handle strong personalities in an attempt to manage the problem. Music. But the truth has a way of seeping out, like water seeping through the cracks in a dam. Before the strain developing beneath the surface erupts in a way that cannot be ignored or explained away, something must ultimately give. As the season progressed, the internal problems began to manifest in ways that were hard to hide. The Fever's on-court performance became increasingly unpredictable, swinging between clear victories and perplexing losses. One night, with their defense suffocating opponents and their offense buzzing with accuracy, they would appear to be a viable contender for the championship. They would then appear disorganized and uninspired as they struggled against teams they should be able to easily defeat. Following games, interviews became exercises in reading between the lines. Music. White would talk about her commitment to the system and doing things correctly in order to vent her frustration with players who weren't buying in. Players would give insightful responses on how they were still figuring things out and learning how to play together. Diplomatic language that made underlying irritations worse. Music. The media began posing more in-depth queries regarding coaching philosophy and team harmony as the subtext became clear. Social media evolved into a battlefield where the conflict was delicately displayed. Players who used to speak frequently on the internet suddenly stopped like each other's posts. Music. Some players would share motivational quotes like, "Be loyal to oneself," or "Don't let other people dull your light." Messages that appeared to be directed at a specific individual or item. Music fans began creating in-depth threads that looked at who was in whose social circle, who attended which music events, who seemed to be genuinely happy, and who seemed to be going through the motions when they noticed these trends. According to multiple sources who spoke on condition of anonymity, the difference was becoming more difficult to ignore behind the scenes. Team meetings were unproductive and antagonistic. While some players would favor a more rapid-fire, freedom-based approach, White would offer techniques that valued controlled assault and defensive stops. Since both sides believed that their own method was the most effective way to win, neither was willing to make a total compromise. Music, the coaching staff was reportedly split. Because they were committed to her objective, White's following assistant coaches encouraged her defensive tactics and meticulous approach. However, other assistants, especially those who had been with the company longer, voiced worries in private that the approach wasn't making the most of the offensive skill on the club. Music, because of the coach's internal conflicts, players were aware that there was no coherent message. Practice sessions became very uncomfortable. Regular drills turned into contentious exercises. Some players felt that White's hours of practice on defensive posture and rotations were oppressive and excessively taught. When the team would scrimmage, the games would frequently shift from cooperative play to individual skill demonstrations. Music. Some players were eager to prove the feasibility of their freestyle approach, which put the front office in a hard position. Music. They had invested heavily on White players as well as their best players. They couldn't simply fire a recently hired coach. Additionally, they couldn't part with the abilities they had developed to build the brand. They had separate meetings with White and key stakeholders to try to thread the needle and find common ground. But mediation only works when both parties are keen to come to a consensus. Moreover, it appeared as music if both sides had solidified their opinions and were reluctant to alter them. Though in private, seasoned gamers who had previously encountered similar situations began to express their worries about the future of this. They had seen teams fall apart in the past, and they had seen promising seasons wrecked by internal strife. They tried to act as peacemakers and arbitrate conflicts, music, between the factions, but in the end, they felt increasingly isolated and unwanted by both sides. The center ground was getting smaller, forcing everyone to take a side. With the goal of causing a ripple effect throughout the league and the organization, the first domino fell swiftly and unexpectedly. The departure of a vital role player who had been a part of the team's core rotation, Music, played significant minutes and was considered a strong contributor both on and off the court, sent a clear and unmistakable message. Put yourself in line or leave. Music, there would be no more warnings or chances to change. Everyone was ill-prepared. It was in the off-season, when roster modifications are easier to forecast and comprehend. A rash decision made shortly after a particularly tragic loss could hardly be explained by emotions. The fact that it happened during what appeared to be a pretty stable period made it all the more shocking. The player was told they would be released, given a brief explanation, and escorted out of the building during a brief meeting. Music. Their stay with the Fever came to an abrupt end. Although the front office's official statement focused on roster optimization, performance analytics, and taking a different course, these decisions are often accompanied by business language. Music. There were murmurs in league circles that painted a very different picture. Sources within the company who. This player had been a vocal critic of White's coaching style and the team's direction, according to a person who spoke on condition of anonymity. They hadn't confided in only close friends or kept their concerns to themselves. At team meetings, they had voiced concerns about strategies they believed were antiquated and rigid. According to insiders who spoke on condition of anonymity, this player had been more vocal in team meetings, criticizing defensive strategies that appeared to limit the team's attacking creativity. They were alleged to have assumed the position of spokesperson for a growing dissident group, Music, speaking up for people who felt similarly constrained but were hesitant to speak up. A warning shot was fired across the bow of a split locker room, a traditional power tactic. They reportedly said things like, "This isn't how modern basketball works anymore." Additionally, we're squandering talent by attempting to play a 20-year-old system. It was White's Music way of demonstrating that criticism would not be tolerated, that her authority could not be challenged, and that loyalty to her system could not be compromised. The message was clear. How well you performed, how well the team liked you, or how long you had been a member didn't matter. If you didn't agree with the coach's vision, you were expendable. The timing of this initial step was crucial. Rather than at the chaos of the season start or at a natural breaking point like the All-Star break, it appeared out of nowhere, shocking even seasoned viewers. This suggested that White and the front desk had been planning their response, keeping an eye out, documenting instances of disrespect and building a case. Before acting, they had been methodical and careful, giving the dissident voices a chance to fully express themselves. The locker area seemed to be filled with shocked and scared reactions. The friends of the released player were upset. Many began crying aloud when they heard the news, yet terror predominated over grief. Music. If this player could, anyone could be set free. Talent, productivity, and relationships within the organization were no longer significant. The only thing that mattered was compliance. A few players privately expressed their shock at the choice and offered the released player their support. Whether out of self-preservation or sincere agreement with the action, others publicly endorsed the organization's decision, posting on social media about having faith in the process and being dedicated to the team's goals. These overt displays of loyalty were visible to all, demonstrating the players' strong support for White. Media coverage of the release was extensive, but ultimately superficial. Because they couldn't find out the real reasons for the adjustment, reporters relied on speculation and statistical analysis to decide whether a player's productivity justified a roster spot. Those who paid closer attention, however, realized that statistics were irrelevant in this case. Here, control, power, and message delivery were at stake, and the message had been understood. Soon after, 2 more players were quickly removed in a series of nearly planned actions. Music. The second release occurred just 3 days after the first, barely giving the first shock enough time to fade. The third happened less than a week later. These roster modifications might have gone unnoticed on their own, as typical mid-season adjustments or the kind of roster tampering that any team engages in when things aren't going well. Teams frequently discharge players. Music. It is a part of the business. Sometimes a player simply doesn't fit the system. Occasionally, their position becomes superfluous when another player takes over. Sometimes there are financial considerations or plans to sign someone else. Music. Separately, any of these decisions could have been rationalized as unfortunate but necessary business decisions. When viewed collectively, though, they revealed something far more deliberate and disturbing. This was a coach who disbanded a group of dissidents and purposefully silenced voices that questioned her authority. It was targeted, intentional, and brutally effective. In addition to altering the roster, White was conducting a purge, eliminating anyone she believed to be a threat to her power. Before these changes, the Heat had been plagued for weeks by rumors of clicking in a disintegrated team. Music. Players were reportedly seated at different tables for team meals, which is a common sign of a divided locker room. Music. The veterans were seated at one table, the novices at another, and the top players at a third. But the real differentiating variables were not age or experience. It is related to ideology. One table reflected those who supported White's approach. One person represented those who questioned it. The use of social media by a number of coworkers has clearly decreased. Music. This is another clear sign for those who are paying attention. Players who used to frequently remark on each other's posts suddenly ceased doing so. The well-selected group photos noticeably lacked some player combinations. The customary camaraderie that sets successful teams apart appeared manufactured, choreographed, and put on for the cameras rather than being truly felt. Players would embrace one another after great plays during games, but the celebration seemed forced and manufactured rather than organic. Music. With these successive releases, Stephanie White appeared to be performing surgery on her team by getting rid of what she thought was the virus's source before it could spread and contaminate the entire roster. She was surgically removing the troublemakers, those she believed were undermining her authority, and